So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. This sprint, I've decided to have a bit of a crack at trying to share what I've been up to in video format, as well as the newsletter that you're about to read or you might already be reading. If you'd rather just read, then please absolutely ignore this video and crack on. But if not, then maybe listen to this at the same time, or listen to this first, or read along, whatever works for you. So the past 2 weeks, I've been basically working on a few different things. I've been focusing heavily on trying to build up my services as Ross Power Consulting and trying to get a bit more clarity on what it is that I want to provide. It's been useful working with one client, definitely, and I just want to keep expanding this. So this newsletter, Interdependence, Talking with Strangers, Connections, the Dangers of Ego, and a Van. You're going to see my eyes going like this because I'm going to be basically checking out the newsletter as I go down. But I am here with you. So, just as a quick one, before I get started, I know that there's 141 people here now, or 136. And I'm really keen to work out actually if this is of value to people and if anyone's actually, getting some insights from this, getting some inspiration, and feeling like this is useful. So first of all, I just wanted to say thanks everyone for being here. I appreciate you. I see you, and I'd love some feedback if you have any. Is the time that this is being sent out working for you? Is this too long? It might well be. It is a long newsletter. I do appreciate that. If you have any thoughts about how I could improve it, if there's anything that you're finding, maybe the order isn't working quite well, anything like that would be really brilliant. So just a quick one. I'm really interested in sort of the scientific method and lean startup and lean development. And one of the things that is crucial to that is the idea of basically following a process of having a hypothesis, an experiment, and then taking observations. So as I mentioned, I'd want to try and get some feedback from you, because basically I have a hypothesis that this what I'm doing, the journey that I'm on, could be of interest to people and could be valuable to people one day, maybe in a similar position to myself. I have an experiment, which is perhaps this fortnightly newsletter and the articles that I'm planning to bring out over the next few months and few weeks. But now I need to make some observations. I need to try and work out actually what's working, what's not working, and find out a bit more about this. So as I just mentioned, it'd be great to have some feedback. So first of all, I've changed up the order. So what I've been reading. So I came across Ego is the Enemy by Ryan Holiday recently, and had a chat with a friend who also said it was pretty powerful for him when he came across it as well. And there's a huge amount that I could go into around ego and how damaging and destructive it can be for us. But I know there's also an understanding that ego is important. It is what motivates us in some ways as well, but it is definitely about balance. One of the things that really jumped out at me was the way that he talks about ego as basically something that encourages us to create stories about our lives and a narrative of our life which hasn't necessarily happened yet. And I think this rings true with a lot of what I talk about with Collecting Dots, and the idea that so much of our time we seem to be spending focus on this futuristic state where we're looking back at the future. And Steve Jobs is saying, which I'm clearly obsessed with, you can't connect the dots going forwards, encourages us in some ways to end up focusing on connecting our dots looking backwards, and we constantly are trying to work out what it is, what our purpose is, and all these different things. And I feel like what Ryan Holiday is actually saying is very true. One thing he says is myth becomes myth not in the living but in the retelling, and I found that quite powerful as a way of helping us realize that actually our lives are not some sort of extraordinary myth at the time, and we should just really focus on just continuing to work hard and be happy and do what we can to live in the present, rather than focusing on what story that we might be able to tell when we look back in the future, because either way we're going to tell a story, so we might as well just live the story at the time. I started this newsletter with this quote: "We want so desperately to believe that those who built great empires set out to build them. Why? So we can indulge in the pleasure of planning our own." Now, I mean, this rings true for me, very much so. I know that I am ambitious, and I am on the process of making some transitions in my life. So it's definitely true that we look for people who have had these big bold ideas and managed to achieve them. But actually, more comforting to me is knowing that there's other people who have been in my position who have also been confused and forgotten what they were doing and had moments of, chaos and lack of structure, and then gone back into more focus and order and made good from it. So I think there's a lot of value in these kind of ideas that ego is that thing that makes us feel like we should plan out the rest of our lives and have things so set and structured and ordered and have goals. And just trying to balance and trying to calm that sense of ego can enable us to much more freely just live in that life. And in doing so, we can actually get to the things we want. There's a whole lot of planning you can do. There's a whole lot of thinking you can do, but the best thing comes from action, from work, from discipline, from belief, and from confusion and frustration. And I think in just focusing on those things and focusing on actually what you want to do now and taking action, that's key. And it's what I definitely feel like I've had trouble with in the past, is focusing too much on planning things and having ideas and sharing ideas and not thinking about actually just getting on with it. So it's been a good one for me. The final quote I wanted to pull out is, "We must shun the false crown and continue to work on what got us here." And I think that kind of captures all of what I've been sharing. So what I've been up to, or what I've been working on for some time, I've been really interested in the idea of interdependence and interdependencies. And it does stem from, I think, from Stephen Covey's book. I think that's where I first kind of thought about it, where he talks about how humans move from dependence as we grow up through life and as we are dependent on our parents, to independence as we become reckless teenagers and we decide we want to flee the nest and go do our own thing. And then the next stage of maturity, which I think many people perhaps don't come to realize, is that actually life then becomes about interdependence and the connection with yourself and those around you, and how the connection with each individual affects other individuals' connections. Interdependence is something which I've been interested in, and in a lot of ways it's what's a theme that keeps recurring throughout my life, whether it's in my passion and interest in blockchain and working in that space, whether it's in talking about dots and collecting the dots and the interdependence of the dots in our lives, or whether it's in just people and networking and understanding that, when you network with someone, you have to just go into the situation without any preconceived ideas and see where it leads. And just having to check out what I've talked about here because I'm a bit off topic. No, I'm not. I've also come to realize that I want to basically build this passion and this belief in independence into my business. And talking with Jamie Roy, who I'm going to come to later on today in the newsletter as the spotlight, he made me realize actually that I should really bring this more into what I want to do and what kind of products and services and the kind of business I want to operate in and live in. And I think if I think about why this matters to business, I think all the businesses I've worked in a lot of ways, and whether big or small, one of the biggest risks and one of the biggest challenges is the lack of interdependence between people, tools, things. It's misalignment, which creates confusion, which makes clarity, it makes less clarity, and it, in turn breaks down trust, and it breaks down the trusting relationships that exist. So I think focusing and having an emphasis on interdependence can be a really key thing to a company's success and a company's kind of realignment and in the new world we're living in. I've also been researching systems and system thinking and having a system mindset, which massively ties into all that I'm talking about as well. A system, one thing says, a system is a relationship of parts that work together in an organized manner to accomplish a common purpose. That makes a lot of sense, and if you think about a product, it's basically a systems of things working to accomplish a common goal. I like this that I found, whether in the graphic, display and typography, image, color and pattern in a poster, the integrated workings of a physical artifact, the sequence of planned events, communications, exchanges of a service or any other human interactions, or the complexities of dynamic and evolving organizations, environments and systems. So basically, whatever we make, whatever we do, whatever we are, it ends up being some form of system and some form of interdependent thing. So I also serendipitously, how do you say that word? I'm not going to even try again. Stumbled across something on Twitter by a guy called Elliot Calander, and his talent stack actually became really interesting to me. At first, I was going at it with the mindset of, okay, what's my individual talent stack? What's my CV of my things? What's my kind of personal capability model? But that quickly kind of changed into something a bit more different. And as you can see, if you scroll through the newsletter, I created a kind of really nice imagery using Elliot's talent stack as an inspiration to try and work out what the interdependencies are and what the connections are between the key pillars that I see of business, which I've put here as products, people, philosophies, and places. And so if you want to check that out, it'd be great to hear your feedback. It's a work in progress. It was done pretty quickly, and I've even left a few of the things that I'm still trying to work out and ponderings I've got in there. There is something there, but it's definitely got some work. Quickly, I also bought a van, which I'm going to convert into a camper van, but I won't labour on that. But as I've said in the newsletter, if what I'm doing at the moment is a quarter-life crisis, then I think everyone should maybe try one sometime. So what made me think and feel? This one is probably a little bit weird, but hopefully it comes with some truth and some interest to you. So 2.5-3 weeks in lockdown in Wales. I'm also in a pretty remote area in Fishguard where we don't know many people. So there's not been a great deal of connection and communication with people. And one thing I noticed is last Friday I went out to get a new trim, new haircut, and I had a few interactions with strangers, and I had a chat with the hairdresser, the hairdresser. I had a chat with the owner of the hairdressers, Michelle, and quite quickly I realized like how much value and how much I enjoyed just having new interactions and just speaking with fresh people and having that conversation with someone who's initially a stranger who quite quickly can become something different. And I mentioned this to my brother TJ, who's just finished university, got a first class in psychology and neuroscience, and he shared something with me which I found quite interesting about the value of connecting with strangers, something he had recently come across, and in quite an old piece of research now, but there was a lot of information found on the value of spending time and talking with strangers through a series of experiments on trains, buses, tubes. They basically looked at actually how much value and perceived outcome someone might think they have by talking with a stranger. What I mean by that is they basically ran a series of experiments where people were to estimate how much they would enjoy speaking to a stranger in this situation, and either they would speak to them or they wouldn't, and then afterwards they would analyze whether it was a positive or negative outcome for them. And basically what was found is that people, they basically thought that they wouldn't want to speak to the stranger. They thought that in a lot of ways, as we focus a lot on our own well-being, we often focus on the things that are productive to us. So whether we're on a commute or going somewhere, we think about maybe, if we're on a plane, we should have a sleep. If we're commuting, we should read a book or prepare for our meetings. And so it was more the fact that something else seemed more productive and a better use of time, and therefore talking to strangers didn't seem like something that would be worthwhile. But actually what was found is that people who talked to strangers had a feeling of productiveness. They felt like they had achieved something, and actually just the very act of talking with a stranger creates more connection, it creates more interdependence. And so I've got more in the newsletter. I won't go into it too much detail, but we are social animals. We are in a time where we are lacking connection, and there is going to be strangers around you even when you go out for your once a day walk or whatever you're allowed to do wherever you are. So talk to strangers. I, for one, enjoy it and find it very valuable, and have always made pretty special friendships with people who otherwise could have just passed me by. So I think it's an interesting thought, and there's more in the newsletter and more to be told if you want to check it out in the link in the actual piece of research. So the final part of the newsletter, my spotlight for this week on Jamie Roy. Jamie and I had a catch up last week. I was a little bit down in the dumps at the time, and but we had a really good conversation about what I wanted to do, the kind of services and products that I wanted to put together. And he really helped me get some clarity on how much I care about interdependence and connection. Jamie, as it happens, is also very fascinated by connection, and as a connection facilitator, what he calls himself, he talks a lot about what connection is and how to create more connection and more truthful connection, and how his belief is that businesses have been kind of breaking down by lack of connection in a kind of a human way. And his thoughts on what he calls relationship environments is really interesting. So I'll just read a bit of what he says. He says, when you build something, there is usually a plan, something to follow to allow you to achieve the desired result. Building is energy intensive. You put one brick on top of the other, and it is very process driven. Environments, on the other hand, already exists. They are always evolving, and everything, including ourselves, are embedded within them. Relationship environments do not come together, they coexist, and a deep understanding of connection and reliance on everything around them. I love what he has to say here. I think it rings true with all of us, whether it's with a partner, friendships, at work, or with strangers. The relationship environment you find yourself in is very much dictated by the way you go into that situation, the way that others go into that situation, whether they're going into it with a sort of a focus and outcome driven, or whether they're going into it with a bit more openness. So check out the video I've put in there below, and you can also find Jamie's LinkedIn there as well. Cool, and thanks Jamie for all the support and kindness. So thanks everyone for listening or reading or watching. If you've got to this part of the video, 1624, message me saying you're at 1624, because if you have listened this long, then wow, I'm impressed. If you have any feedback, let me know. It'd be great to hear from you, and thanks very much. Have a great rest of your week.